The Cuban president condemns the United States for its attempts to destabilize the Caribbean nation. African leaders call for World Bank funding towards economic recovery and COVID-19 vaccine access. Heavy rains experienced in most European countries have triggered calls for action on climate change. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the South. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel has condemned the United States for its attempts to destabilize the Caribbean nation. The Cuban head of state highlighted the lack of honesty from the United States government regarding its humanitarian concern for the Cuban people. He called on the U.S. to lift the economic sanctions imposed by the previous administration of Donald Trump, including those imposed during the pandemic.
Las medidas también incluyen un programa.
Everything is calculated according to the non-conventional war manual. The head of the OAS has already made a statement spreading more lies. The U.S. Congress is hunting us by demanding its political adversaries of the current administration to act against Cuba. They will consider a hostile threat to their national security any mass migration attempt to their coasts.
Y exigiendo a sus adversarios políticos de la actual administración que actúen ya contra Cuba.
And thousands of government and Communist Party supporters have taken to the streets across the country to defend the democracy and support the political model on the Caribbean nation. President Miguel Díaz-Canel and Cuban leaders have also joined the demonstration in the capital, Havana, on Saturday.
These riots, like last Sunday's events, happen when weak-minded people let themselves be influenced, so we are here to show that this is not the Cuban youth. Cuban youth think a little more. That's why I'm here.
In Chile, left and right-wing demonstrators have clashed during a march in defense of the Cuban Revolution. The demonstrations of both groups took place in front of the Cuban embassy in the capital city of Santiago. Right-wing sectors sparked violence and confrontations, while revolutionary groups demanded an end to the blockade imposed by the U.S. on the island for more than 60 years. Left-wing activists denounced that the White House is carrying out an international strategy to overthrow democratic governments that do not comply with their political interests. The Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has denounced terrorist groups financed by former Venezuelan politicians and supported by the U.S. and Colombian governments who had plans to assassinate him.
We have defeated the Bogota axis, Miami, Madrid in one of their plans. They bet. There is evidence that this terrorist group is politically supported by a group of former members, by a group of right-wing politicians, and financed from Bogota, from Miami, from Madrid, directed through telephone system to attack, kill. They call it that the party started. The party in Caracas has already been known. Part had plans to assassinate me. How can you call criminals of this type who put their snipers to shoot at the highway? Cars that were passing and killed taxi drivers and innocent people who were passing by the highway Caracas-La Guaira, the Cementerio address, the Paraíso address. As you can call people like this who had groups ready to set fire and attack the city, have only one qualification: murderers and terrorists, and you gave him a great defeat. Congratulations on his rise and continue in combat.
The interim Prime Minister of Haiti, Claude Joseph, has denounced attempts to divert the attention on investigations of the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. Joseph said there were many clues about the assassination of the president and that investigations are still underway to expose the main person behind the murder. He added that the security forces will not stop working to bring those responsible to justice. Following the assassination last week, the interim Prime Minister Claude Joseph declared himself in charge and said the country will be under a temporary state of siege. And Haiti has started a general vaccine rollout on Saturday after health workers and senior citizens were vaccinated a day before. Hospital University of Peace is heading the vaccination campaign under the supervision of Haiti's health ministry. Earlier this week, Haiti received the first Moderna vaccine batch as part of the U.S. donation to the COVAX program. Haiti has reported more than 19,300 confirmed coronavirus cases and more than 480 deaths, amid the biggest wave of COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began.
Yes, I see that we have started well. We have made awareness where we the staff and went to the clinics not associated with a hospital to explain what the disease is and how to protect patients against it.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Rwandan capital, Kigali, has been placed under a 15-day lockdown as the country battles a second wave of coronavirus. The country's health officials have announced that all movements outside homes in the capital will now require an approved permit from the police, except for essential service providers. Rwanda's hospitals have been overwhelmed with rising COVID-19 cases and are faced with a critical shortage of beds and medicines. The new restrictions will last until July 26th.
During these 10 days, what we are going to do is fight strongly for ourselves, even if the living situation will be bad. But we have to accept the change and protect ourselves, like washing our hands, wearing a mask, observing a social distancing. When those 10 days are done, we will go back to normal.
African leaders have called on the World Bank to prioritize funding towards COVID-19 vaccines and economic recovery. Moussa Faki, chairman of the African Union Commission, called for the reconstructing debt payments to struggling African countries. He said this during a meeting aimed at discussing World Bank aid plans for African countries over the next 3 years.
Much remains to be done to overcome this crisis, which, as we are seeing these days, is global with several cycles. Indeed, less than 3% of the total population of Africa has received a first dose of vaccines compared to about 54% in the US and the EU.
We will never tire of calling for urgent debt restructuring, accompanied by a bold policy that goes beyond special entitlements, to alleviate the pressing need for immediate cash for vaccine purchase and to lay the foundations for economic recovery.
The World Health Organization has warned that COVID-19 cases are rising in Africa. The organization said there were growing concerns that some hospitals across the continent might get overwhelmed by the pandemic.
Over the past month, Africa recorded an additional 1 million cases. This is the shortest time it's taken so far to add 1 million cases. Comparatively, it took around 3 months to move from 4 million to 5 million cases. This COVID-19 resurgence is the fastest a continent has seen. New cases have increased for the 8th consecutive week, and 18 African countries are now in resurgence. The Delta variant, which is currently the most transmissible of all the variants, has been detected in 21 countries in Africa. There is a consistent upward trend in 12 countries with sharp increases in some, such as Algeria, Malawi, Senegal, and Zimbabwe.
Mauritius has opened its borders to international travelers after months of isolation. Phase 1 of the reopening of the borders for the Indian Ocean island allows vaccinated guests to stay in one of the country's resorts. Travelers to Mauritius are required to undergo a PCR test 7 days before departure, and a negative result is required to enter the island. Vaccinated travelers are also required to have a PCR test on arrival at the airport. Residents in South Africa have cleaned up shopping centers and stores looted during and left organizations were ransacked in the unrest. South African Jacob Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in jail in a corruption inquiry. His successor, President Cyril Ramaphosa, who came into to grab young democracy.
Yeah, it shows you the two sides of South Africa. The bad side and the good side. First of all, Bernd
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had described the United States mission in Afghanistan as a failure, as Taliban's made gains at a time when foreign forces pulled their remaining troops from the country.
Left, as President Biden confirmed, because they considered their mission to be accomplished. Of course, he tried to paint it in the most positive colors, but everyone understands that the mission failed. We are not interested in chaos being established there, not only because we do not want it to spread to the neighboring countries friendly to us, but also because we sincerely wish well to the people of Afghanistan.
And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Heavy rains experienced in several Western European countries have triggered calls for urgent action on addressing climate change. The World Meteorological Organization has reported that Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands received rainfall equivalent to 2 months of rain in just 2 days. At least 126 people have been reported killed from the floods in Germany and Belgium.
We need to step up climate action. We need to step up the level of ambition. We're not doing nearly enough to stay, within the targets of the Paris Agreement and keep temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius, even 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. The Gulf of Finland in the Baltic Sea is record warm, according to researchers at the Finnish Meteorological Institute, up to 26.6 degrees Celsius on the 14th of July. So that's the warmest recorded temperature of the waters since records began.
In Germany, rescue workers have toiled to clear up the damage laid by water on Saturday as the death toll from flooding in Western Europe rose above 150. Police say that more than 90 people have died in West Germany's Orwell County, one of the worst hit areas, and more casualties are feared. Another 43 people were confirmed dead in neighboring North Rhine-Westphalia state, Germany's most populous.
In the background, we are hearing trucks being pulled out of the water. 28 vehicles have been reported here that were underwater, though in the meantime the water went down a bit. We don't know if there are any persons inside those cars, but we hope that everyone managed to get out. In the next few days, we as a country will do everything we can to organize the funds that are now needed in direct aid. Here in Erfstadt, money is paid out very and bureaucratically to people who are in need. You can imagine that if an entire apartment is destroyed and there is nothing left, there is no more money, no more easy card, no more anything. And to help immediately is the most important thing in the next few days.
Meanwhile, thousands of residents of affected areas of southern Netherlands have been allowed to return home on Saturday morning after being evacuated due to severe flooding. Prime Minister Mark Rutte's government has declared the flooding a state of emergency, opening up national funds for those affected.
The entire basement was flooded, and the damage is probably in the tens of thousands of euros. Apart from the emotional value, which I find more important, magazines, radio bulletins from 1960 until
of heavy rains, severity of the problem that has left more than 20,000 people affected. Colombian authorities have started rationing electricity in order to prioritize power supply to hospitals and vaccination centers. Most of regions have also run out of water. Thousands of people had taken to the streets in Paris to protest French President Emmanuel Macron's plan to require a COVID and that all workers must be fully inoculated, sparking a rush to book appointments for the jab. The new measures European nations in cases, blaming part of the highly transmittable Delta variant, which has taken hold on the continent. France says Saturday it will require people not fully vaccinated and arriving from some European countries to show a negative COVID-19 test taken within the previous 24 hours.
I ask that people be given the freedom to choose whether or not they want to be vaccinated. No more and no less. A return to something that is constitutional. I am not opposed to the vaccine. If people want to get vaccinated, great.
I really feel like we are to infringe on everyone's freedom. I don't think we should have two opposite groups, the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated. I think it's up to each person to do what they want to do.
Britain reversed a plan to ease travel restrictions on France just 2 days after they were in containment of the coronavirus. The move comes despite the fact that France currently has lower rates of the virus than the UK, where the highly contagious Delta variant is driving a surge in infections. The French tourist industry has rejected this resolution.
I think it's a disaster. I think that they should stop this whole thing. It's ridiculous now. We've got to live with the virus. We've got to learn it's a new thing. It's not going to go away.
Disappointing because I'm double vaccinated and I thought that as of Monday it would be alright and I'd be able to come back and not have to self-isolate.
Catalan firefighters have battled to contain Creus in Girona on Saturday.
This morning, we went to the market of Porto de la Selva. We finished shopping, then we went to have something to drink as usual. And when we were having coffee, we began seeing the smoke around 1 o'clock.
Of Chinese companies to cut their pollution or face heavy penalties.
What we want to have is the cap, quote unquote, the cap, the target, which was set up by the legislators or by the regulators at the lowest cost. That's the whole point of the carbon market, right? Because otherwise you would go to command and control. But you want a market mechanism to review the true cost so that
other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Thank you for watching.